Hello. This presentation is designed for members of a local historical society interested in learning more about how newspapers covered events as they were happening. My topic is 1918 influenza pandemic, but instead of trying to cover the entire history of the outbreak, I wanted to trace how newspaper reporting changed as the crisis unfolded. The 1918 pandemic spread around the world during the last year of World War I. Historians estimate that it caused more than 500 million infections and over 50 million deaths. The movement of the military worldwide helped carry the virus between countries, and while the war was happening, it made it harder for governments to respond and communicate well. Many officials wanted to avoid panic, and so information about infections and deaths was often withheld or downplayed. There was no vaccine or antiviral treatment, so communities depended on school and business closures and limits on public gatherings, so isolation was the key. The first newspaper article I selected appeared in the Manchester Guardian on July 3, 1918, and its headline read, "Influenza Spread, Height of Epidemic Not Yet Reached." The article reported that the virus had become widespread in Manchester, but it still described most cases as mild. Doctors admitted that the outbreak hadn't yet reached its highest point, but the article didn't suggest the kind of crisis that would follow. And just 5 days later, the Manchester Guardian published the influenza, more schools closed. By then, the outbreak was interrupting everyday life. Schools were closing because so many students and teachers were sick. Factories and businesses were dealing with a large number of absent workers, and deaths were being reported. The article even included brief reports from Berlin and India, reminding readers that this was becoming much larger than a local outbreak. By October, the tone of the reporting had changed completely. On October 5th, the New York Times announced drastic steps taken to fight influenza here. New York officials ordered most stores to close by 4 o'clock, changed factory schedules, and even placed limits on theaters. The purpose was to reduce crowding on public transportation and slow the spread of the disease, which sounds familiar. The size of the headline and its placement on the front page showed that influenza was no longer being treated as a temporary disruption. It had become a public emergency. My final newspaper article returned to Manchester. So the Manchester Guardian on December 20th had this headline, "Preventing Influenza, a Problem Unsolved," and it captured how uncertain the situation remained. The article reviewed the possible causes of influenza and questioned whether the precautions being used were even effective. Even after months of illness and death, doctors still didn't fully understand what had caused influenza or how to stop it. Looking at these articles in order creates a different experience than just reading a modern summary. The first headline carries uncertainty. Then within days, schools and workplaces were being affected. By October, governments are making drastic changes, and by December, medical writers are admitting how much remains unknown. For a historical society audience, these newspapers offer a reminder that people living through history rarely understand how the story will end. They only know what appeared in that day's paper. Following those headlines allows us to see the pandemic not only as a worldwide disaster, but as an unfolding experience that changed how communities understood illness and public responsibility. I also found this to be a really interesting topic to research. If I were to continue studying it, I'd love to compare newspaper and media coverage of the 1918 influenza pandemic with coverage of the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. I think it'd be interesting to see what changed over the course of a century, but also what stayed the same. Thank you.